The alert came through Interpol channels at 9:47 a.m. on a Monday morning. Facial recognition software had flagged a match at an international airport. The individual who'd passed through customs 23 hours earlier was on the FBI's most wanted list. He'd been tracked across 4 countries over 6 years. He was suspected in 11 violent assaults. His victims were random strangers. His attacks were unprovoked and brutal. And now he was confirmed to be in a major American city with a population of 2 million people. The fugitive's pattern was what made him particularly dangerous. His assaults weren't crimes of passion or targeted violence. They were random attacks on people who happened to be in his proximity when something in his psychology triggered aggression. A woman walking her dog in Paris, a businessman at a train station in Brussels, an elderly man in a cafe in Amsterdam. The victims had no connection to him. The attacks appeared motiveless, but the violence was severe and sometimes fatal. Interpol had been tracking him for 6 years, since the first documented assault in France. He'd moved between countries, never staying long enough for local authorities to establish surveillance. He used false identities. He paid for everything in cash. He avoided security cameras when possible, and he seemed to have an instinct for when law enforcement was getting close, disappearing hours before raids that should have captured him. His psychological profile suggested a complex disorder. He experienced sudden rages triggered by perceived slights or threats that existed only in his mind. Someone making eye contact could be interpreted as aggression, requiring violent response. A person standing too close became a threat, demanding immediate attack. His perception of reality was distorted in ways that made everyone around him potential victims. The assaults followed a pattern. He'd arrive in a city, establish temporary residence, live quietly for weeks or months. Then something would trigger him. The assault would be sudden, violent, and seemingly random. Then he'd disappear before police could respond. By the time investigations connected his presence to the attack, he'd already left the country. U.S. Marshals received the Interpol alert with full case files. The fugitive had entered the country through a West Coast airport using Canadian documentation that passed initial screening. The false identity was sophisticated enough to clear customs, but not sophisticated enough to avoid facial recognition systems that checked against international warrant databases. By the time the match was confirmed, he'd already left the airport and entered the city. The timeline was critical. His historical pattern showed he typically went weeks between assaults, but the interval was unpredictable. Sometimes 2 months would pass, sometimes 2 days. The only certainty was that eventually, inevitably, he would attack someone, and in a city of 2 million people, that victim could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. Marshals established a fugitive task force within hours. FBI joined for the international components. Local police provided manpower and geographic knowledge. Homeland Security contributed entry and immigration data. The operation brought together resources from multiple agencies because the threat level demanded maximum response. The immigration data provided starting points. He'd listed a hotel address on his customs form. Investigators contacted the hotel immediately. He'd checked in Sunday evening using the same false identity. He'd paid cash for 3 nights in advance. He was currently registered in a room on the 4th floor. But when hotel security checked discreetly, the room was empty. His belongings were gone. He'd left sometime during the night. Hotel surveillance footage showed him departing at 3:17 a.m., carrying a backpack. He'd walked rather than taking a taxi. The direction he traveled was captured on city cameras for several blocks before he entered an area with less coverage. The trail went cold in a residential neighborhood 3 miles from the hotel. Behavioral analysts studied his pattern. His previous attacks had all occurred in public spaces, parks, transportation hubs, shopping districts, places where people congregated, and his presence wouldn't seem unusual. The residential neighborhood where his trail ended didn't fit that pattern. He was either hiding there or passing through to another destination. The decision was made to saturate public areas with surveillance while simultaneously searching the residential zone. Plainclothes officers were positioned at transit stations, shopping centers, parks, and entertainment districts. His photo was distributed with instructions: observe, but do not approach. He'd shown willingness to fight violently when cornered, and confronting him in a crowded area could trigger exactly the kind of random violence everyone was trying to prevent. Monday afternoon brought the first potential sighting. A transit security officer reported seeing someone matching his description on a subway platform. The sighting was 40 minutes old. By the time it was reported, surveillance footage from the station was reviewed. The facial recognition match was only 63% confidence. Possibly him. Possibly someone who resembled him. Not certain enough to redirect resources, but concerning enough to increase focus on the transit system. The subway system was vast. 200 stations across 80 miles of track. Daily ridership exceeded 1 million passengers. If he was using public transportation, tracking him required either direct surveillance or electronic trail. He had no phone registering on networks, no credit cards generating transaction records. He was operating in complete analog mode, invisible to the digital surveillance that tracked most people constantly. Marshals coordinated with transit authorities to review footage from major stations. The task was enormous. Hundreds of cameras, thousands of passengers, limited personnel to analyze the feeds. But the alternative was waiting for him to attack someone, then responding after the damage was done. Proactive surveillance was resource-intensive, but necessary. Tuesday morning brought credible confirmation. A police officer conducting a routine patrol encountered him at a coffee shop. The officer had been briefed on the manhunt and recognized him immediately. But before the officer could call for backup, the fugitive noticed the attention. He stood abruptly. He left money on the table. He exited through the rear door into an alley. By the time backup arrived, he was gone. The coffee shop location was analyzed. It was in a commercial district 12 blocks from where his trail had ended the previous night. He was moving around the city, staying mobile, probably sleeping in different locations each night. The coffee shop owner was interviewed. The fugitive had been a customer for 30 minutes, working on a laptop and drinking coffee. He'd seemed normal, quiet, focused on his screen. Nothing about his behavior suggested he was an international fugitive, wanted for violent assaults. That normalcy was part of his danger. Between attacks, he appeared completely ordinary. He could sit in a coffee shop working on a laptop like thousands of other people. Then, something would trigger his distorted perception, and he'd transform into a violent threat. The unpredictability made everyone around him a potential victim without knowing they were at risk. Surveillance teams flooded the commercial district. His pattern was becoming clearer. He was frequenting public spaces during daytime hours, coffee shops, libraries, parks, places where someone could sit for extended periods without attracting attention. He was probably homeless or staying in temporary accommodations that didn't require identification. His mobility suggested he was walking rather than using vehicles or identifiable transit. Wednesday afternoon, 56 hours after his airport arrival was confirmed, another sighting occurred. A librarian reported someone matching his description using a public computer terminal. Security was notified. Police were called. But by the time officers arrived, he was gone. Again, library footage confirmed it was him. He'd been researching maps and public transportation routes. He'd used the computer for 47 minutes. Then, he'd logged off and left through the main entrance. The computer terminal he'd used was analyzed. His browsing history showed searches for parks, shopping centers, and residential neighborhoods. He was mapping the city, learning routes, identifying locations. The searches suggested planning, but didn't reveal specific intentions. Was he planning an attack? Planning an escape route? Simply learning the geography? The ambiguity was frustrating, but the activity confirmed he was still in the city and actively operating. Behavioral experts updated their assessment. His pattern showed he was in the reconnaissance phase, learning the environment, establishing comfort with geography. This phase typically lasted 2 to 4 weeks in previous cases, but stress could accelerate the timeline. Being actively hunted by law enforcement might trigger paranoia that would shorten his comfort period and precipitate violence sooner than his historical pattern suggested. Public awareness became a delicate balance. Warning people created vigilance, but also created panic. The decision was made to issue a general alert through news media. A dangerous fugitive was believed to be in the city. Public should be aware and report suspicious behavior. But the specifics of his attack pattern weren't released. Creating fear about random violence in public spaces could cause more harm than the threat itself. Thursday morning brought the break investigators needed. A homeless outreach worker reported encountering someone matching the description at a shelter. The individual had stayed one night, used the shower facilities, received a meal, and left before sunrise. He'd given a false name, but the outreach worker recognized him from news coverage. The shelter was in an industrial area, adjacent to the residential neighborhood, where his trail had originally gone cold. The shelter provided another data point. He was using support services. That suggested limited resources and planning. Someone with significant cash would use hotels. Someone using shelters was either conserving resources or had depleted his funds. Either scenario created pressure that could accelerate his violence timeline. Marshals positioned surveillance around other shelters and support service locations. If he needed these resources, he'd return to similar facilities. The network of shelters across the city was mapped. Teams positioned to observe without creating obvious law enforcement presence that would scare him away. Thursday evening, he appeared at a different shelter across town. This time, marshals were ready. Surveillance confirmed his identity within minutes of arrival. The shelter was surrounded discreetly. Officers positioned at all exits. The plan was to wait until he settled for the night, then execute arrest when he'd be contained and away from potential victims. But at 8:43 p.m., before the tactical entry could be coordinated, he left the shelter. He'd eaten dinner and showered, but didn't request overnight accommodation. He walked out the front entrance and headed toward a nearby park. Surveillance teams followed at distance. He entered the park as evening darkness fell. Families were leaving. Joggers completed final laps. The park was transitioning from day use to night quiet. He sat on a bench overlooking a playground. No children were present, but playground equipment was visible in the fading light. He sat motionless for 11 minutes. Then a jogger passed on the path behind him. The fugitive's body language changed. He tensed, stood, turned to watch the jogger. His hands clenched. His breathing, visible even from surveillance distance, appeared rapid. Marshals recognized the signs. This was his pre-attack behavior documented in previous cases. The sudden tension, the fixed attention on a random person, the physical preparation for violence. The jogger had no idea he'd been selected as a potential victim. He continued running, putting distance between himself and the fugitive. The moment passed. The tension in the fugitive's posture gradually eased. He sat back down, but the incident confirmed the risk. He was exhibiting attack behaviors. His perception had identified the jogger as a threat requiring response. Only the jogger's continued movement and increasing distance had de-escalated the fugitive's internal trigger. Next time, circumstances might not create that natural separation. Next time, the violence might occur before the potential victim could inadvertently move to safety. The decision was made to arrest immediately. Waiting risked an attack on an innocent person. The park was clearing. Civilian presence was minimal. Tactical teams moved into position. The fugitive remained on the bench, apparently unaware of the coordinated movement surrounding him. At 9:07 p.m., marshals approached from multiple directions. Commands were given. Federal officers, show your hands. Do not move. The fugitive looked up and saw officers closing from all sides. For a moment, his expression showed calculation. Fight? Flight? Neither option was viable. He was surrounded, overwhelmed, trapped. He stood slowly. His hands remained visible, but not raised. Officers repeated commands. Hands above your head. Get on your knees. Each command was firm and clear. He complied slowly, reluctantly, but he complied. Within 20 seconds, he was prone on the ground, handcuffed, searched, secured. The arrest was controlled and professional. No violence, no resistance beyond his initial hesitation. He was transported to federal custody while investigators processed the park bench area and began the extensive documentation required for international prosecution. Interrogation revealed limited information. He acknowledged his identity once fingerprints confirmed it. He refused to discuss the assaults. He claimed he'd come to America for tourism. The laptop found in his backpack contained research about the city, but nothing explicitly incriminating. His false identity documents were sophisticated but traceable. His story about tourism was transparently false, but difficult to disprove, absent his confession. But confession wasn't necessary. Interpol had compiled evidence from 6 years across 4 countries, surveillance footage from assault locations, witness testimony from survivors, physical evidence linking him to scenes. DNA recovered from victims matched samples obtained from items he touched and discarded. The case was comprehensive, even without his cooperation. Extradition requests came from France, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. Each country wanted to prosecute him for assaults within their jurisdiction. The U.S. had charges for immigration fraud and false documentation. The diplomatic coordination would take months. Eventually, he'd face justice in multiple countries for crimes committed across borders. But the immediate victory was his capture before he'd attacked anyone in America. The jogger in the park had been seconds away from potential violence. The surveillance teams had recognized the pre-attack indicators and moved quickly enough to prevent harm. 56 hours from alert to arrest. No American victims. One dangerous fugitive removed from circulation. The case demonstrated the importance of international cooperation. Interpol's facial recognition match at the airport, information sharing between agencies, coordinated surveillance across the city, resources from multiple jurisdictions working toward common goal. No single agency could have tracked him alone. Success required collective effort. It also demonstrated the challenges of predicting random violence. His victims weren't selected through rational criteria. They were random people who unknowingly triggered his distorted perceptions. That randomness meant everyone was a potential target. Protecting the public required finding him before the violence occurred, rather than responding after. The city's 2 million residents went about their lives unaware of how close they'd been to having a serial attacker operating among them. The jogger in the park would never know he'd been moments from assault. Families using that playground the next day wouldn't realize a violent fugitive had been arrested on that bench hours earlier. The invisible protection provided by law enforcement was exactly how the system was supposed to function. For U.S. Marshals who worked the operation, success was measured in prevented harm. No attacks occurred. No victims were created. One dangerous individual was stopped before his pattern could continue on American soil. The coordination with international partners ensured he'd face consequences for his previous crimes, while being prevented from committing new ones. The fugitive remained in federal detention, awaiting extradition proceedings. Psychological evaluation confirmed severe personality disorder with paranoid features. He perceived threats constantly. His violence was defensive in his mind, responding to dangers that didn't exist in reality. Treatment might manage symptoms, but couldn't eliminate the underlying condition. He would spend years, likely decades, in secure psychiatric facilities and prisons. His victims from previous attacks were notified of his capture. For some, it brought closure. For others, it reopened trauma they'd been trying to process. All appreciated that his pattern had been stopped. No one else would experience the random violence they'd endured. Their suffering had at least contributed to his eventual capture and justice. Law enforcement agencies analyzed the operation for lessons learned. The speed of the Interpol alert, the coordination of surveillance resources, the behavioral analysis that recognized attack indicators, the tactical patience that waited for optimal arrest conditions. Each element contributed to success and would be incorporated into future operations. The hotel where he'd initially stayed implemented enhanced screening procedures. The shelter system developed protocols for reporting suspicious individuals without violating the privacy and dignity of legitimate clients. Transit authorities improved their camera coverage and facial recognition capabilities. Each institution touched by his presence improved its systems in response. For the public, the case was a brief news story. Dangerous fugitive arrested in local park. International cooperation led to capture. No local victims. The story cycled through news coverage for a few days, then was forgotten as other events captured attention. But beneath that brief publicity was a more significant narrative about global crime, mental illness, and the invisible work of protecting communities from threats most people never knew existed. The park where he was arrested returned to normal use. Joggers ran the paths. Families used the playground. Evening walkers enjoyed the sunset views. The bench where he'd sat and exhibited attack behaviors was just another park bench. No plaque marked the location. No memorial noted the jogger who'd unknowingly escaped violence. The park was simply a park, safe, because someone had done the work to make it so. For 56 hours, a man who'd attacked 11 people across 4 countries had been loose in an American city. For 56 hours, 2 million people had been at potential risk from random violence they couldn't have anticipated or prevented. The capture eliminated that risk before it materialized, and that outcome, that prevented tragedy, represented the highest measure of success in fugitive operations. The international fugitive, who'd evaded capture for 6 years, had finally run out of places to hide. His pattern of random violence had been stopped. His victims could find some measure of justice, and a city's population could continue their daily lives, protected by law enforcement personnel who'd worked invisibly to keep them safe from a threat they'd never known existed.